For the sake of transparency, I feel the need to note that I was provided a review copy for the purposes of this video. It didn't affect anything as far as my opinions or evaluations, but I just figured you, as the viewer, should know that, because I am a professional person. Also, I'm recording this voiceover at night, which I don't usually do, so if it sounds weird, that's why. But this is kind of a weird video anyway, so you know what, let's just roll with it. As I've slowly devolved into a crabby old man, you know what I've really come to appreciate from the games I play? When they clearly understand what they're supposed to be. Let's be real, how often is it that games, especially new ones, are worsened, if not outright ruined, because they are, for some godforsaken reason, hellbent on being something they decidedly aren't. It's not super relevant to this channel, but I think the best example of this in the modern gaming industry is seen with fighting games. Why, for the love of all that is holy, does every new fighting game insist on shipping with a completely bland, boring, and unnecessary story mode that no one cares about? If there's any premise that really doesn't need to be accompanied by a narrative, it's knocking someone's lights out. And if you're looking for an example in the realm of role-playing games, then most any modern MMO will do. Pet systems, player housing, and enough outfits to make your wallet weep, with no worthwhile adventures or community elements anywhere in sight. That frustration is why to Aerthen, an indie RPG released by Ephium, and I sincerely hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I apologize if I'm not, earlier this year was such a breath of fresh air. Stylized after classic 8-bit RPGs like pre-Strife Final Fantasy, To Aerthen is a thoroughly entertaining exhibition in the turn-based gameplay that has made those games so memorable. It is also one of the most unhinged games I've ever played. Yeah, I just kinda figured I would get that out of the way now. You play as Valcon, who finds his best friend Zephyr lost in the woods near their home, ostensibly smoking some dank kush and generally vibing. As it turns out, Zephyr is actually an entity of the Void who now must embark on a quest in order to stop his older brother, Zormoth, from taking over the world. I bet that's a turn you didn't expect this to take. Just how nuts is this game? Well, you transform into farm animals at one point after walking into a town, if that helps to put things into perspective. No? Could I offer you the stuffed teddy bear that acts as one of the game's main antagonists instead? How about the fourth wall breaking dialogue? This game is, and I only use this phrase because I really can't think of any other way to describe it, a playable shitpost. The only reasonable way I can think of to describe To Aerthen is as follows. Take the presentation and combat of your favorite 8-bit RPG and set it against the backdrop of a fever dream. It doesn't matter that the story is a stereotypical tale of saving the world. Why? Because every plot point, character, and line of dialogue is presented in such an over-the-top and chaotic way. It's clearly written for the purpose of getting a chuckle out of you and not meant to be taken seriously. Most of the characters, both those that comprise your party and the enemies you're put up against, feel and act like they're straight out of Monty Python. The plot has something to do with an eldritch being who tries to coerce Zormoth into an arranged marriage. At one point, a divine deity reveals itself to you as a chicken. Honestly, I reached a point where I just gave in. It's not that important in the grand scheme of things, but I must admit, there is a sort of charm to its oddity. In a world where nearly every RPG, no matter who it's made by or what its gameplay is like, tries to have such weighty narratives, seeing a game go in the opposite direction was a welcome surprise, if one that takes some getting used to. In that way, even if it feels completely nonsensical at times, you can't help but want to keep going in order to see what ridiculousness crops up next. And if this doesn't interest you, that's fine, because as the story doesn't take itself all that seriously, you don't have to either. You can pretty much ignore it completely should you so choose. I, however, found it to be an amusing, if somewhat surreal, change of pace from the norm. If anything, my biggest issue with the story is that it's so absurd, so frankly unserious, that it's liable to give the wrong impression of this game. One would be forgiven based on everything I've shown for believing that To Aerthen is just one big joke, but between both the presentation and the in-depth, detailed combat systems, there is a lot to appreciate here. While the story might be a meme, the gameplay certainly isn't. I mean, look at all this. I'm willing to bet you wouldn't have expected this sort of depth based on the description of the story I gave. There is real substance here. I don't think I need to break down these systems. They're self-explanatory, and you've got eyes, you can see what's on screen. It's a traditionally binary turn-based system in the sense that each round lets you choose what you're going to do, whether it be attack, defend, or use an item, and the order is determined by the comparative speeds of specific characters and the actions they're carrying out. There's no active time elements here or anything like that, and the few more intricate mechanics, such as how stats like luck work, are explained early on. For as familiar as this all is, the game routinely commands your attention. You can't just coast through this experience. You've got to stay apprised of the situation at hand, as well as understand how your party members are outfitted with regard to item loadouts and each other. Though each character fits an archetype, such as the way that Zephyr is the mage, Valorcus is the tanky fighter, Typhus has a lot of protective and healing skills, Samantha is easily the best stat buffer and or debuffer, and so on and so forth, there is a fair bit of overlap in terms of what spells and abilities characters learn as they level. This means you can swap party members in and out while maintaining a sense of balance, letting you choose who might be best for dealing with the mooks of any given area without sacrificing too much when you don't have to. For instance, fielding a team of spellcasters, specifically those with lightning skills, while in the Moon Temple is practically required to make any hay. Pretty much every party member can be outfitted in several different ways using a variety of weapons and armor, many of which have unique properties that can amplify existing abilities or grant new ones. Characters also have abilities that are exclusive to them as well. Valorcus is the only character that can dual wield, while Valkon can jump in front of low health allies during combat to prevent them from going down. All of these factors are considered in response to the bestiary of enemies you fight. Goblins, elemental beings, that goddamn bear from earlier who for some reason has a Gundam suit, are just some of what you'll be pitted against. Each enemy has its own strengths and weaknesses that force you to adjust and experiment accordingly. There's no analyzing spell or item that just tells you everything you could want to know. When a new enemy stands before you, you've got to start cycling through your options to figure out what's going to end them most efficiently. There is no one-size-fits-all party allocation, except for the fact that you're probably never going to bench Zephyr, if we're totally honest, nor any truly useless mooks, and that fact alone helps to keep 2 Aerthen intriguing. It's thoroughly engaging and represents the most enjoyment I've gotten out of turn-based systems in quite some time. It takes everything there is to love from the turn-based classics it's outwardly inspired by, and utilizes those aspects extremely well. The best compliment I can pay to this gameplay is that it never gets boring. I've talked in the past about how turn-based combat can lose its luster as a game drags on, but in large part because of everything I just ran through, this was fun from start to finish. It definitely helps that you can run from battles with impunity, meaning you can move on once you've had your fill of any given area, but you have to make sure you do your due diligence as well. Run too often and you'll find yourself underleveled, which can seriously come back to haunt you when you go up against a boss that you can't escape from. The bosses, which I might add provide a really nice challenge. They walk that fine line between taking you right down to the wire without feeling unfair or cheap, making defeating them all the more fulfilling. Granted, it wasn't nearly so fun as to push me to hit the supposed level cap of 200, though that might be an added bonus for any hardcore grinders out there, but it was certainly so to make me rarely run from combat outside of when I was simply exploring, and seek out and complete nearly every optional dungeon available. Yeah, 2 Aerthen doesn't have any real side quests, but you can find a number of optional dungeons on the world map, the items and experience granted by them providing even more to savor the gameplay with. Each dungeon, required or not, is littered with lootable chests that provide more than enough incentive to make you want to scour every tile. Speaking of things to savor, the presentation. The theming leans more heavily into sci-fi elements in the same vein as a series like Phantasy Star, and it works pretty well. I mean, with how weird everything is, I don't know how it couldn't, but still. There's a lot of color, enemy sprites and character portraits are well detailed and varied, and even the simplistic combat animations have a certain appeal to them. The overworld is expansive and a joy to explore, whether on foot, by boat, or through the air. Hidden on the map are some secrets to be found, so make sure to keep your eyes open. From a technical standpoint, the menus are easy to navigate and look quite nice. White text on blue backgrounds, people. No idea why developers bother with anything else. The only true issue I have with 2 Aerthen is that it can feel a bit inconsistent at times. It has certain quality of life features like the aforementioned ability to flee battles at will and carte blanche to save whenever, but no in-game map of the overworld or quest log, which can make the typically vague directions on where to go next a bit hard to follow. Also, while most areas look pretty solid, others, like this castle, which was actually a pretty important dungeon, don't. The interior decorator in this place was clearly a minimalist, and seriously into mustard yellow. The music is also a bit hit or miss. It's not necessarily that there's any bad tracks, just more so that some pieces are far superior to others. Is it a little jarring that a game with such exceptional combat systems is backed by a story that's so out there? Yeah, a bit. Would it be better with a more earnest narrative? No, I don't think so. This game is not built to try and make some sort of grand statement. It's meant to provide phenomenal gameplay within recognizable systems and an experience that's easy to enjoy. It's not trying to rewrite the history books, and it's better for it. It knows exactly what it is. Look, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that 2 Aerthen is an unrecognized classic, that it deserves to be placed in the pantheon of 8-bit RPGs with the very games that inspired it. And guess what? I don't feel any responsibility to do so, primarily because it's painfully obvious that 2 Aerthen doesn't think that of itself. If you're looking for an easy-to-play, lighthearted RPG experience with great combat, 2 Aerthen is the game for you.